I was still holding the cranberry tart when Jonas said it. Tessa's favorite, he'd mentioned it offhand once, back when things still felt easy between us. I'd used her mother's recipe, the one she left folded in a greeting card after that first awkward Christmas. I'd found fresh cranberries at the co-op, let them soak overnight, added orange zest, just like the note said. It sat warm in my hands, wrapped in foil and good intentions. Their new house smelled like rosemary and cloves. Children's coats hung on the wall, tiny shoes kicked off beneath the bench. For a moment, everything looked exactly like it should. Before we sit down, Jonas said, not looking at me, "We need to talk about the missing money." I blinked, confused. I thought he meant something else at first, an awkward family joke maybe. But he stepped closer, his voice tightening. "The joint fund, the 50,000, it's gone. And we know it was you." My fingers tightened around the dish. "Excuse me?" Tessa stepped in, then arms folded, eyes sharp. "You helped us with the digital access, remember? You were the only one with Mom's recovery info. The withdrawals happened right after that." I looked from one to the other, searching for the punchline, but no one was laughing. "I didn't touch your accounts," I said quietly. Jonas's jaw shifted. The bank traced the transfers. "You were the only common link." I set the tart on the counter. It wobbled slightly, catching the edge of a placemat. "That doesn't make it true." Tessa's voice dropped lower, like she was saying something already decided. "You've always been particular about control, about appearances." I didn't answer. Couldn't. My mouth had gone dry. From the dining room, the twins' laughter floated in briefly before the door closed again. Someone had turned on soft music. Ella Fitzgerald, I think. I stood in the middle of their perfect kitchen, surrounded by matching plates and gratitude signs, and realized no one had asked me what happened. They'd decided. Jonas crossed his arms. "Unless the money's returned by Monday, we'll need to involve legal counsel. You should go." He didn't raise his voice. That's what made it worse. I reached for my coat, draped over the bar stool, fingers shaking as I pulled it on. I didn't speak again. There was nothing to say. As I stepped outside, the last light was bleeding out of the sky. Inside, they were already pouring wine. The room smelled like burnt coffee and stale carpet. The kind of place meant for silence, not comfort. I left the tart in the car. Let it sit there, cooling alone in the back seat, while I checked in without small talk or eye contact. I sat on the edge of the bed with my coat still on, not quite ready to peel away the day. The heater rattled to life, groaning like it resented being used. I stared at the grainy wallpaper, the chipped wood veneer of the nightstand, and thought about the way Jonas didn't flinch. The way he looked at me like someone crossing a line on a spreadsheet. Not his mother. After Lyle died, Jonas was 13. Too tall for his age, shoulders hunched like he was always bracing for something. He didn't cry at the funeral. Just stood next to me in that itchy suit jaw clenched, refusing to crumble. I remember thinking he's growing up too fast. I remember promising myself I'd carry the weight for both of us at least until he was ready. I picked up extra shifts at the firm, said no to promotions, so I could be home before dinner. We sold the second car. I learned how to stretch a casserole into 3 meals. I paid off Lyle's medical debt in 4 years. When Jonas got into Oregon State, I cried in the parking lot after dropping him off, then drove home and refinanced the house to help cover what his partial scholarship didn't. And when he and Tessa struggled to buy their first place, I offered $10,000 toward the down payment. A loan, I called it at the time, just so their pride stayed intact. The repayment never came up again. Then there were the little things, watching the girls so they could have date nights, buying winter coats, covering emergency dental bills. Tessa once said, "I had a savior complex," half joking. I laughed with her. But I never brought it up again. I reached for my phone, not sure who I meant to call. There was no one. I used to talk to Nell sometimes before she moved south. The line between presence and loneliness is thinner than people think. You don't notice it until something snaps, and you're left trying to remember who knew you before the silence settled in. I leaned back on the bed, arms crossed, shoes still on. The air felt heavy with old memory and fresh betrayal. Maybe they thought I wouldn't fight back. Maybe they believed I was too tired, too soft. But if they were going to accuse me of stealing, they'd better be sure I didn't still remember how to follow a trail. Some truths, I thought, don't need to be explained. They just need to be proved. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Just lay on top of the covers, eyes fixed on the water-stained ceiling, hearing their voices on loop. Jonas saying my name like it was a formality. Tessa with her cool, clinical precision. The kind of tone people use when they've already made up their minds. Anger never came. It should have, but it didn't. What I felt instead was colder, sharper. A silence that moved with intention. I'd spent decades buried in audits tracing errors across spreadsheets and balance sheets until something clicked. I didn't shout in boardrooms. I showed the math. So I sat up, rolled my shoulders, and reached for my old laptop. The casing was chipped near the corner, a relic from a life before retirement. I booted it up slowly, fingers already remembering the sequence of passwords and protocols. I'd kept the licenses active just in case. Some habits refused to die. The shared account Jonas mentioned had been opened after Lyle's death, meant as a safety net while the estate sorted out. I hadn't touched it in years. He took over the management of it once the girls were born. He wanted to be the provider, and I stepped aside because it seemed like the right thing to do. I pulled up public transaction records, some still accessible through the old dashboard, limited but enough. 3 transfers, each spaced 10 days apart, $19,850, $14,900, $15,000. It wasn't just the amounts, it was the pattern. Each figure sat just under the federal threshold for flagged withdrawals, structurally designed not to trigger alerts. That wasn't an accident. Someone knew what they were doing. Someone wanted to move large sums without oversight. The dates caught my eye next. The first withdrawal happened the same week Jonas's cabinetry business filed for loan deferment. The second 3 days after Tessa quietly shut down her marketing LLC. The third 2 days before their younger daughter's private school tuition was due. I kept clicking, checking timestamps, correlating files. It wasn't hard. The sloppiness of it almost offended me. They didn't expect I'd look. They assumed I'd vanish in shame. I leaned back, rubbed my temple. The digital trail was flimsy but telling. Someone moved that money deliberately. Someone who knew the limits of oversight. And whoever it was counted on me not asking questions. I opened a browser window and logged into the investigator forum I still had guest access to. I typed out a short message to Miles Clay, a compliance officer I'd trained back in Chicago. Asked for access to Greencrest Bank's branch-level withdrawals for the prior 30 days. Said I needed to verify a pattern. Told him it was personal. The response came in less than an hour. Still got it, Marlis. Sending you what I can. I closed the laptop, letting it rest on my knees. 3 payments right under the line, coordinated with stress points in their lives. A textbook bleed-through of desperation wrapped in entitlement. This wasn't just circumstantial, it was tactical. And if they were willing to lie that cleanly, what else had they already taken without permission? Miles didn't ask questions. He just sent the files along with a note that read, Be careful what you find. The folder landed in my inbox around 2 a.m. Inside were detailed withdrawal logs, timestamps, teller IDs, and camera angles from the local Greencrest branch. I opened the first video, half expecting nothing useful. But there it was, the footage from 10 days prior. The woman approaching the counter wore a camel coat and a knit hat pulled low, big sunglasses, a mask. She looked like someone playing dress-up in anonymity. She glanced behind her twice, then slid something across the counter. An ID, I assumed. She pulled down the mask for a moment to confirm identity. Even grainy, even muted, I knew her face. Tessa. I paused the frame. Her expression was tight lips, drawn. Not nervous, focused. She signed something quickly and tucked the pen into her own purse before the teller could retrieve it. The timestamp matched the first withdrawal. Nearly 20,000. In person. I leaned in closer. The account they'd accused me of raiding was accessed by Tessa. Not through a phone, not through a computer. At a teller window. On a weekday when I was 3 counties away helping Eleanor schedule a medical transport for her neighbor. I opened the second video. Jonas. No sunglasses. No disguise. Just that same blue coat he wore last Christmas, the one I gave him after his old parka gave out. He looked relaxed, chatty with the teller. Even smiled. He signed something too. His posture was loose, easy, like he belonged there. The third video was Tessa again. Same coat, different sunglasses. 15,000 gone. 3 in-person withdrawals, none involving the online banking system they accused me of exploiting. No digital trail with my name on it. No forged logins. Just faces I knew signing away money under the cover of family trust. I checked the metadata next. The recovery email address linked to the account had been changed 2 weeks prior, when I helped Tessa organize her apps and clean up shared passwords. At the time, she said the password manager confused her. I'd shown her how to set up 2-step verification, walked her through secure access. She took notes in a little spiral-bound book. That same notebook was sitting on their kitchen counter the night I left. The phone number for verification had been updated too. It wasn't mine. It was registered to Jonas's business line. They hadn't just stolen money. They built a stage, used my willingness to help as the backdrop let me play the role of trusted mother, all while lining up the shots for later. I stared at the screen hands, still jaw tight. Not because I was surprised some part of me had seen this coming, but because of how precisely it had been executed. They hadn't panicked. They planned. The more I traced the lines, the more I saw how long this had been forming. A silent erosion, slow and deliberate. Trust weaponized. I closed the files and compiled what I had: videos, logs, screenshots, timestamps, labeled each with quiet precision. There was still more I needed, but this was enough for now. Enough to see the outline of what came next. I clicked Save on the folder and renamed it Proof. If I had the truth in my hands, would it be enough to make them see who I really am? I didn't call ahead. I didn't need permission to step back into the house I once helped pay for, filled with furniture I'd assembled on weekends, walls I'd painted during Jonas's first deployment. The driveway was full. Tessa's SUV, Jonas's truck. The girls' scooters scattered near the porch. They were home. Good. The black folder sat on the passenger seat beside me. I'd wiped it down twice that morning out of habit. It used to hold case summaries and audit flags. Now it held something heavier. I walked to the front door, pressed the bell once, and opened it before anyone answered. Old habits, still second nature. Inside, the air smelled like roast chicken and thyme. Soft music played in the background. Someone had been laughing, but the sound stopped as soon as they saw me. Tessa was by the island, sipping something from a ceramic mug. Jonas leaned against the sink, arms folded, mouth set. The girls weren't in sight, probably upstairs or at a friend's. I didn't speak, just stepped inside, laid the folder on the counter, and opened it. The first photo went down without preamble. Tessa at the bank counter. Sunglasses, low mask, pulled back. The teller slip beside it bore her signature. Jonas didn't move. I placed the second sheet beside it, him at the same branch, grinning at the teller, pen in hand. The third, Tessa again. Different sunglasses. Same coat. "I didn't steal your money," I said. Neither of them responded. Tessa glanced at Jonas, then back at me. Her voice was calm, but the edge in it was hard to miss. "You always needed to feel in control, Marlise. This is just another way to prove you're smarter than the rest of us." I looked at her for a long moment. This isn't about being smart. It's about not being framed. I laid down the IP logs next. Showed the login history, the altered recovery email, the phone number linked to Jonas's business account. Jonas shifted his arms, tightening across his chest. "You used my help," I continued, voice steady. "You waited for me to walk you through every step, and then you pulled the money in person, not once, not in panic. 3 times. Still, he said nothing. I reached for the final sheet, the comparison signatures. Tessa's name on the teller slips matched to her handwriting from last year's holiday note. Identical loops. Same slant. "This is who did it," I said. "And you knew it wasn't me." Jonas exhaled, slow and uneven. "You should have just let it go. It would have settled." "You mean it would have been quiet?" He looked away. Tessa's face remained unreadable. "You came here for a confession." "No," I said. "I came here to return what you said I owed." Their eyes flicked to the folder, to the evidence spread between us. I brought the truth. "You can do what you want with it." Jonas opened his mouth as if to speak, but stopped. His hand dropped to the counter, fingers brushing the edge of the photo. He didn't look at me. I didn't wait for their next line. I closed the folder slowly, slid it across the island, and turned toward the door. Behind me, the silence felt practiced. They were good at pretending nothing happened. But not even silence could smooth over what they'd tried to erase. Was this about money, or was it about erasing the version of me that refused to be used? I paused at the threshold, one hand still on the doorframe. Jonas hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. Tessa was the only one breathing with any certainty, but even her silence had started to crack at the corners. "I'm not pressing charges," I said, not turning back, "but I've sent everything to Brent. He has the folder now. You'll hear from him if anything needs to be sorted." Still nothing from Jonas. Not even a nod. Just the clink of Tessa's spoon against her cup. "You built a story," I added, softer now. "And you almost sold it." Almost. I stepped outside without closing the door behind me. Let them decide whether to shut it. The wind had picked up since I arrived. My coat pulled against my shoulders as I made my way down the front walk. The tart from Thanksgiving was still in the back seat of my car. I hadn't touched it since that night. I thought for a brief second of leaving it on the porch. A parting gift, a hollow gesture. But I didn't. I didn't owe them sugar to cover what had rotted. Back at the motel, I dropped my keys on the nightstand and sank into the chair by the window. I felt lighter than I had in days, but not in a way that comforted me. It was the lightness that comes when something finally slips out of your hands. When the weight you've been carrying is no longer yours, but the emptiness it leaves behind stays. My phone buzzed just after 9. A voicemail from Nell. "Hi, Marlise. It's me. I heard—" "I don't need the details." I just want you to know I believe you. If you need a place to be that doesn't ask questions or require explanations, come stay here. The guest room is clean. You know where the key is. I sat with the message for a long time, played it twice, maybe 3 times. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear the words until I heard them. Not proof, not justice, just belief. Outside the window, a couple argued softly in the parking lot. Their silhouettes passed beneath the dull orange glow of the street lamp. It was the kind of night that blurred things, edges, voices, memories. I pulled the blanket over my lap and leaned my head back against the chair. There had been no apology, no breakdown, no desperate pleading for forgiveness. Just a still kitchen, a tight-lipped wife, and a son who couldn't meet my eyes. Maybe I hadn't gone back for resolution. Maybe I'd gone back to see how far I'd already stepped away. If they never apologize, is knowing the truth still enough? Nell left the porch light on just like she used to when I visited in the years after Lyle passed. I let myself in with the old brass key tucked under the planter. Same spot, same rusted edges, same quiet welcome. Her house smelled like lemon balm and old books, a place untouched by betrayal. I didn't unpack much, just enough to make the guest room livable. The rest stayed in boxes near the wall. I told myself I was only staying a week, maybe 2, until things settled. Weeks turned into months. Nell didn't ask for stories. She offered space and strong tea and silence that didn't press. She never once brought up Jonas or Tessa, not even when my name showed up in the local paper beneath a tiny write-up about my new weekend seminar. It started small. A notice posted at the library. Financial safety for seniors. Protecting your legacy. I thought 5 people might come. 14 showed up. By the 3rd week, we had to move to the larger meeting room. They brought notebooks and coffee and questions about things they'd been too embarrassed to ask their children. I talked about guardianship clauses, account access, digital fraud. I used real examples stripped of names, but not of meaning. No one knew the story behind the warnings, and I never offered it. The work felt useful, grounded, clean. Spring came early that year. I spent most mornings in Nell's sunroom, watching the crocuses push through the earth like small, defiant declarations. One morning, a white envelope arrived. No return address. No handwriting I recognized. Inside was a photograph Jonas at 7 years old, standing in the backyard with a cardboard sword and a pillowcase tied around his neck. A knight ready to defend imaginary kingdoms. On the back, in small blue ink, someone had written, "We didn't know what we were destroying." There was no signature. I kept the photo, tucked it into the back of a drawer behind the warranty receipts and the utility bill I kept forgetting to change to my name. I didn't show it to Nell. Some evenings, I'd think of calling, just to ask if the girls still remembered the song I used to hum when they couldn't sleep. Just to see if Jonas had noticed what his silence had cost. But I never picked up the phone. The only sound that mattered now was the scratch of a pen in a seminar notebook, the rustle of pages turned by someone trying to understand what they were worth. I still have the black folder. It sits in a drawer beneath my tax returns and a copy of Lyle's will. I haven't opened it since that day in their kitchen. Some truths don't need to be proven again. But how do you forgive a child who never asked you to